Hey everybody! A few weeks ago I did an image of a platypus. It was my first aquatic scene and it turned out really well, so I decided to do a video demonstrating some of the techniques I used to make that image. I'm going to pick a slightly different subject for this one though. I'm going to do an image of a drowning woman. It sounds a bit morbid, but it's actually a recurring theme in art. It usually falls under the title of Ophelia, based on the character from Shakespeare. But you see it all throughout Victorian art, poetry, literature. You even see it in some more modern mediums. For instance, the end of the James Bond movie Casino Royale, that the heroine drowns, and I hope I didn't spoil the ending for too many people. But it's a common theme, so I've decided to do it for tonight's artwork. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so here we are in Poser. This is where we're going to start. I've already loaded the Victoria 4 character. It's a common character you can get from daz3d.com. Last time I looked, she was still free. They might charge some money now. It's not too much though. Anyhow, one of the things I've done is I've turned off the inverse kinematics. Sometimes they start by default on her legs, and that'll mess things up. Now we're going to have her floating in the water, and we want her face down. So I'm just going to select the hip, and rotate around, I think it's the x-axis, 90 degrees the other way. Okay. And then I'm going to actually jump to frame 20. Now what I'm going to do is some work in the cloth room, and it works in conjunction with the animation frames. So you want to set sort of your starting position at 1, and then the final position she's going to wind up in somewhere in the middle of the set of frames. We have a set of 30 frames. We're going to pick 20 as our sort of our key frame for this. And then I'm just going to pose her somehow, you know, in a kind of natural position, as if she's floating face down underwater in some gently flowing lake, or I would say river. Now I'm going to have some importance here with her hand. I want it to look like she's going to have a bundle of flowers that she'll have let go of and are floating away. So I'll have this hand kind of open and out to the side. Meanwhile, this one can be down a little further. Let's tilt her body up a little bit. Okay, I'm not going to be too worried about her legs because they're going to be covered by a dress. Let's bundle that. Let's make her hand grasp just a little bit. That's a little too much with the thumb. Okay, we're mostly concerned with her upper body. The rest will be covered by a dress. It's flowing in the current. Okay, and that's enough right there. So now I'm going to jump back to frame number 1 and load the dress. Alright, so I'm going to load a dress here. This is something I picked up off of renderosity.com. I think I paid about $10 for it. It's just a generic sort of medieval dress. First thing I'm going to do is take that and set its parent to her hips. This will center it on her better. And then I go to parameters and then fix those. Now it should be centered on her. Yeah, it is. Okay, so I'm going to go to the cloth room. Oh, actually, before I do that, I'm going to create the current for the river that she's floating in. And for that, I'm going to use a wind force. I'll switch to the top camera. I don't want too many clicks there, but that's okay. Select that wind force again. That's just called a force field here. And then I'm going to move it over to the side and rotate it so it faces her. Alright, let's go back to the main camera. Okay, so I'm going to move this, oops, have it on rotate. I'm going to angle it up just a little bit so it kind of blows her dress sort of in this direction, you know, off the ground. to counteract gravity just a bit. Let's move it a little bit more onto the bottom part of the dress, because the top part's going to cling to her body. It's transparent right now, but when we actually render it, it'll be a whole color. And let's set the range up higher. One's fine. Now you see these lines, they go past her dress. Set the amplitude up a little higher, and we'll set the turbulence, since she's in a current, as high as it'll go. Now we jump over to the cloth room, do new simulation. With this dress, it works better to have the self-collision on. Clothify, and we'll select the dress. That's Robe 1, happens to be its name internally. Set it to collide against Victoria 4. And we'll set the fold resistant down to 1, because we want this to be kind of a fluttery dress in the water. Yeah, that should do it. We calculate simulation and take a break, because it's going to probably take about 20 or 30 minutes with the number of polygons in this dress. So we'll kick it off, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, here you can see that the simulation is finished, and now we have her dress kind of flowing off to the side. Let's give her some hair. And it takes a minute to load this hair. It's kind of a complex one. And I'm going to give it a preset that I picked out beforehand, and I'm going to make her hair black, just so it looks a little bit better underwater. At least I think it'll look that way. Can always change it later if it doesn't look good. I don't want to cover her face with her hair. That's a bit of an artistic faux pas. So we'll move that down just a little bit. And now I've also, just after the simulation was done, I changed it obviously to the shaded view, and I worked on her expression just a little bit. So with that, we'll save it and go to view. Alright, so here we are in view. I'm going to just delete my default sphere that I like to have. I'm going to go set the sun softness to 5%. Make sure the color is straight white. This is going to be an underwater scene. The sun doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but it does make some. Make sure the shadows are set down to 85%. Sky color, all this doesn't really matter too much. Except the light, and I want global radiosity. I moved it up a little bit towards the higher sunlight quality. And this is set down to -1, the quality boost. This just speeds the render up a little. Let's put some ground down. Doesn't need to be anything too complex. Just something to have our plants, our seaweed grow on at the bottom. Yeah, that's good right there. I'll pick a quick texture for that. I usually use my favorite, which is sediment. Gives it a nice muddy texture. And I'm going to turn that into an ecosystem. Then we'll just add a bit of seaweed. This is just a default plant that comes with Vue. Make sure the whole terrain gets the ecosystem, and make it quite a bit bigger. That perhaps is a little too big. Back off a bit. Or you know what? Make this so that they don't quite all grow straight up and down. Alright, that's good right there. Okay, so now I'm going to import my character. Alright, so I've moved her, I've imported our character and positioned her in the frame. I think I want to make this a vertical picture, so I'm going to change this to standard PC vertical. And now I'm going to make her a bit bigger to compensate for that. Let's fix that camera angle some. And we're center a little bit. You can just do it by moving the camera. Alright, I think I want her floating a little bit more horizontally. And let's not make her intersect the ground. You know what, we'll do that anyway, because I don't want to have her too high in the frame. And her arms make a nice S shape here for the composition. However, I'm going to move her back just a little because I'm going to have some flowers floating out of her hand over right about here. Alright, now to create some underwater plants, I'm just going to use a simple grass plant that comes with Vue called the Akuba. I don't know how to pronounce that. But it makes a good underwater plant. You just have to adjust it a little. First we'll make it a bit bigger, and then you double click on it. We are going to make it a lot longer with a lot less fall off. Oh, I'm sorry, with a lot less gnarl. Droop. Ah, there it is. Turn the droop down. Even less, because we want it straight up and down, almost. Not entirely. But there we go. That creates kind of a seaweedy type plant. It's real good for your water scenes. Make sure it's not intersecting our character. And then we can just duplicate it to make a few more. Oops. So you do that by holding down the Alt key and just moving it, and that creates a duplicate. And you give it a quick spin so it doesn't look too much the same. Actually, let's put this in front of her arm, which means we need to make it a bit smaller. And make sure it's on the ground by hitting that drop button. And duplicate a couple more. Now this is going to disappear into the murk here when we have the actual water, so not too worried about it at the moment. Make sure this one's on the ground. That should be enough for now. Alright, so I'm going to adjust the camera angle a little bit more. Not so much ground dominating the composition. Alright, so we're going to need some bubbles coming out of her mouth. Actually, first, let's hide this terrain, because it's eating up a lot of my video memory. Actually, we can just hide these plants as well. So just send them into a layer that's hidden. Alright, so we want to give her some bubbles coming up around from around her head. I'm just going to start with a sphere. Drag it up near her mouth, near her head. Now, bubbles, when they're coming up out of the water, aren't perfectly spherical, so we'll smush that sphere just a bit. Maybe give it a twist. Twist it the other way. And the closer they are to her mouth, the smaller they're going to be. Actually, they would stay the same size going up, but what will happen is bubbles will join together as they get towards the surface and make larger bubbles. And we'll just duplicate that a few times, giving it a few twists and changing its shape. You can make an awful lot of. You can make a lot of these. It'll look pretty good the more you have. Do some maybe really little ones. Oops. Just hold down the Alt key and drag around a bit. Okay, now as you get up towards the top, we'll create some more unusual shaped bubbles. So I'll make this one a little bit bigger. And we'll duplicate it, and we'll keep one close by. And select both of those, and hit this button over here. This is the I think it's called Hyper Blobs. And what it's going to do is going to merge those two into a sort of joined shape that gradually melts together. So it'll look like a distorted bubble. Let's pick this one here. And we'll create one great big bubble right here. From those three, same thing, hyperblob those together, or metablob, I guess is the word. Now, I'll do one more. I'll just copy this whole thing. Just give it a spin this way. Okay, so now I'm going to select all of these. Just for organization purposes, I'll put them in their own layer. And I'm just going to use a predefined bubble texture that comes with View. It's under the glasses. There's a bunch of them here. You can always experiment with which one you think looks the best. I'm just going to pick 4. So I do a quick preview render. You see they look pretty good, like as bubbles might. Now we are going to put some flowers floating out of her hand. So for that, I'm going to use just a couple of stock models of flowers that I have saved off. Alright, so I'm going to sort of move over towards her hands a bit. And then I'm going to import, or actually, here we have flowers. I think it's a little bit too big. Shrink that down. Angle it more like she was holding it. Let's move that down to there. And then just duplicate it. And give it a little twist to make it look different. Let's move further down. Twist some more. There we go. And let's see what else. I have a few other flower types. Hyacinth. Oops. I'm going to turn that, not resize it. We'll have this one float off to the side a little more. And I'm going to adjust the camera again to make this fit better. And then we'll do a couple more. Back towards your hand. Now, as the current's catching this one, I'm going to have it carried further away. Let's not shrink it down too much. Okay. Alright, work on that camera just a little bit more. I want her hand off the side here. Alright, here, a quick preview of that. Alright, that looks pretty good. Okay, one of the things we're missing for an underwater scene right now is water, so let's add that in. And I'm going to set that for tropical water. Liquids. Tropical water. And I'm going to raise it up so that our character is in fact underwater. Now you notice she disappeared. For some reason view, there might be some way to make view show you the what's under the water, but I don't know what it is. Let's bring this back in. Where did that sea go? There it is. I have it really high up, that's why. Okay, now I want those plants to stick up just above the water a little bit, like they're right here. And actually, she definitely looks like she's underwater. Now we're going to fix a few things. Oh, actually, I started out showing a bunch of atmospheric settings, but I'm actually going to throw them all out. And I picked this underwater one right here. Oh, there we go. Now you can see a quick preview render. She really looks like she's underwater. Now, she doesn't look too good yet. We're going to fix that. And we're going to do that by adding a quadratic light, just kind of spotlight. And we're going to make sure that that light has a, I forget what this is called, volumetric light. And you can see it looks a great deal better. Actually, let's lower the sea for a second to make sure the light's centered on the girl. And let's make the angle a little steeper. Okay, we also want to make this light look like it's shining through water. Right now it's pretty solid. Alright, so double click on the light. We're going to select gel, enable gel. We're going to load a material. Under light gels, we're going to select caustics. Might want to do caustics 2. We'll try 2, see what happens. Let's raise that sea level back up. It looks pretty good. Let's make this light a little stronger. So we'll put it to 150. We'll soften it just a little bit. Oh, that looks good right there. Now she's a little dark though, so we're going to add a couple of lights just to light her up. These will be directional lights. Let's here, point a camera, it's easier. Now for the directional lights, they'll be a little soft. Now they're going to be underwater, so they're going to be kind of a blue-green color. And we're going to have no shadows because these are fill lights. And we're going to use the preview window to make sure it looks pretty good. Okay, that'll be 1. We're going to do 2. One more over here. Make this one a little brighter. Since this is on the sunlight side. Alright, and we'll go into the water, and we can change under the transparency tab how murky this is. I'll make it a little less murky. Alright, let's see how that looks. Well, that looks pretty good right there. So I think I'll call that enough and set it up for a final render. So I'll see you in a few days when this render's done. Alright, so here's what it looks like with a final render. Looks pretty good. I might do a larger version, but for the purposes of this video, made a few quick changes. I've added some fish. Looking at them now, I may take them out because they look too much the same. And I also changed the flowers a bit. I just kept the purple one. Got rid of all the rest. So with that, we'll call this one done. I might do a slightly different render for the purposes of publishing. But today we're done with this. So keep in mind, once I'm done with this, I'll have a print up in my print gallery, which you can find at, and we'll wait for the window to open here, www.danielsgridge.com. Thank you very much, and y'all have a good evening.